Diablo 4 has been out for just a little over a month now, and some of us are gearing up for the first season heading our way on July 20th. With all that being said, there are some strong quality of life things that the game desperately needs. In this video today, we're going to talk about my top picks for quality of life improvements I'd like to see in Diablo 4. The way I'll do this is by addressing each item I'd like added or improved upon in the game by first going over what is wrong with the existing system, then some proposed fixes. The aim here is to help alleviate some of the unnecessary actions in the game, or at least just kind of help streamline things. If this is your first time on my channel, the way I like to do things here is by upfronting the knowledge within my videos so you can decide if it's the right one for you. And that's kind of a bit harder for me to do in a list style of video, but you'll find every item I'll be discussing in the chapters in both the timeline and the description. Quickly just take a peek at those and make sure they're things you're interested in about the game. Then just quickly navigate to the ones that interest you the most. If nothing on my list interests you, then please just by all means go ahead and shut the video down and get back to destroying things in Diablo. I want you back and enjoying the game. If you are heading out, please don't forget to like, comment, and or subscribe. Each one of those things does help me out in a very, very huge way. Also, I have a massive playlist filled with all of my guides and how-tos for Diablo 4, linked in the description as well as at the end of the video if you need help with anything else. But lastly, don't forget to follow me on Twitch, where I will be streaming Diablo 4 and Baldur's Gate 3. Let's get started here on my top quality of life improvements we need in Diablo 4. So to start us off, we're going to go into item sorting. It's kind of a big pain point of mine right now in the game. So right now, if I press this button, this is what happens. Things are sorted by slot and then by item power. That's how that's done. And the slots are kind of funky. So it'll go, the way that this sorts, it does helmet, chest, two-handed weapon, then one-handed weapon, then glove, leg, boot, this, that, this. That's how the sorting works in the game. I'd personally prefer if I could just simply sort all of this by just item level, or give me different sorting options. Let me sort it by slot if I want. Let me sort it by item level if I want. Because really, once you crest into that end game, right, or even just the mid game, as soon as you get into Torment, Sacred is no longer useful. It's really, you're starting to look at ancestral items because they've got the best rolls on your affixes. And even further, maybe I've got like a perfectly good chess piece. This is not a perfectly good chess piece. And I don't really want to upgrade it. So I don't really care about this showing me certain slots and I'm not going to really focus on it. Or maybe I am looking for certain slots and I really want a headpiece. So I want to sort that by that slot first. Or even further, maybe I just want to see my legendaries first, and then my sacreds, and then my, ancestrals, and then sacreds. And I mix us up, right? Let me get all my legendaries. Now I'll sort those legendaries by their rarity first. So I can see, okay, here are all of my ancestral legendaries. Meaning that unless they particularly roll a max roll for me, and I'm going to get on to this in a little bit, I probably am not going to extract that aspect because it's just going to be so expensive, right? The trade-off here is that when you extract a sacred or ancestral aspect, it's super expensive to extract, but very cheap to imprint. A standard non-ancestral or sacred is the converse, is inverted of that, right? So it's cheap to rip off, but it's expensive to imprint. So I think having a better sorting of how I approach my items is going to just help me in vendoring them quickly or sorting them into my stash quickly and other things like that. I definitely think that sorting just needs a little bit of a tick up so that it helps me to quickly sift through all of this. Because what this is really doing right now, the pain point I'm seeing is that I'll sort this and now I go, okay, let me look at these boots. And I have to really find out which ones are going to fit item power wise or maybe certain rarity wise, that just having the ability to sort them by different sets of categories would help me out a ton. Our next conversation is about aspect variables. And this can roll one of two ways in my mind. And these are my kind of proposed solutions here. So as it stands, if I look at an aspect like aspect of disobedience, which I think we all can agree is an amazing aspect, but the aspect doesn't have a good value if you use the Codex version. 0.25% increased armor is such a small amount, and for a total of 25%, it's just not worth it. You're just not really going to actually use it. You might use it to test it out, but you're really not going to get the full use of it. Another example would be aspect of the explosive mist, which I don't think I have in here. I do not. Hey, here's a good thing. Aspect of the explosive mist, when it gives you a min roll of 0.2, or I'm sorry, of 2 seconds, it's just not useful. You need it to have that full 5 seconds. And what I find frustrating about aspects as they are in the game is that if I get a base aspect, as you can see right here, it's got a max roll. I got this around level 43. This I got around level 67, and it has truly, in my opinion, a less than optimal roll. I think aspect of disobedience can only be useful at 0.4 and higher. So I think the solution here, and my proposed solution, right? I think the solution could be any number of things. I'm not a game developer. What the fuck do I know? Is that you either have a tighter range. You've got maybe instead of 0.25 to 0.50, it's 0.35 to 0.50. And that way, or 0.35 to 0.50, why I'm saying 3.5. And that way, okay, you know, I'm not at 0.4 and 0.35 is not that bad. It's actually still pretty good. It still is going to do some stuff for me. And I think that that's the kind of issue I have with aspects, is that you have a range that is not viable whatsoever. And you've got a range that you want. So I think that aspects either shouldn't have that range. They should have a range that is, this is viable to good. You know, so it's like a C to an S versus like F to S. Or you have it so that the minimum an aspect can roll is dependent upon its rarity, sacred, ancestral, or base. Let's use, if I have something that's got like a base, like an easier one to kind of, let's just say that this rolled from 1 to 10. Let's just assume it rolled from 1 to 10. Okay, so a base aspect, let's just say that then that my proposed solution is that a base aspect can roll from 1 to 10. Well, I'd say that if it's a sacred aspect, it can roll in the 25th percentile and higher. Meaning, and we'll round up for easy math here, meaning that this aspect, if it rolled from 1 to 10, now if it's a sacred, can only roll from 3 to 10. And if it is an ancestral, now it can only roll from 5 to 10. So you're doing that 50th percentile. This makes it so that anytime you're grinding ancestral aspects, which you're going to be doing in the mid to late game, right? As soon as you hit Torment, you're only looking for ancestral. It helps to make it so that grind, it doesn't feel so punishing. Like nothing is worse than, is this a, hey, what do you know? I have a saved aspect that's actually pretty good. Nothing is worse than getting a ancestral legendary and having it be just a trash level of aspect range. This, let's just say that said 2%, being basically the same as a codex power. And I think that is kind of a little rough because it helps incentivize me to keep grinding after ancestral aspects, which of course have that heavy upfront cost to extract, but it keeps me playing at that ancestral level versus trying to find or figure out some sort of way to get into like the base level, because I don't really care, because I can roll base level aspects, can have that max roll, so it's not really that much of a gamble for me. I think there's just too much RNG on the range of variables you can get with your aspects, especially because certain builds, I'm going to take, for example, the Umbrous aspect for my rogue. I need it for this build. And this is a defensive aspect. There are plenty of not useful or just currently broken defensive aspects. Another example would be aspect of the Crowded Sage. That's a terrible aspect, but it is part of the pool that the Umbrous is trying to roll within. And because that pool will only get larger as we go from season to season with more aspects, I think having it so that if I get a top ancestral aspect, I at least know it's going to be in the 50th somewhat percentile, and it will be at least somewhat viable for my build versus me looking at it and going, well, crap, I just can't really use that. So I think that's my solution for aspect variability. Going back to our inventory, and this might be a personal problem, but I find that the consumables tab is very cramped. And I think that what could simply be fixed here is, and we've got the room on the left and right sides, just kind of squeeze this little guy over and give me a sigils tab. Because I find that I have far more sigils, or maybe even far more potions, depending on which kind of balance I'm in right now. And really kind of stuffs things up. Now, this again could come down to my own personal inventory management and being better about making sure I clear out my sigils. And there's going to be more on that in just a little bit. But I find that I typically have a ton of sigils in a given moment. If I'm doing a ton of nightmare dungeons at a time, I'll just kind of keep jumping through them, because you typically will get 1 to 2 sigils per dungeon that just kind of keeps you on that rampage. Or if you're doing any kind of whispers at the same time, you'll typically get some sigils from those. Or if you're getting grand caches from your world bosses, sigils will come in plenty of shapes and sizes as you crest into that later portion of the game. But you guys let me know. I mean, do you think that the sigils needs their own tab, or perhaps something a little bit different? So whether or not you're on the fence about sigil currencies or whatnot, I think we all can agree that we need some way to reset an entire Paragon board. Even if it's in the middle, I think that that's totally fine, right? Because you're just simply swapping where these points are going to connect. It's the same thing no matter how you rotate this board. These are 4 connecting points. They're always at the cardinal directions. So let me swap a board right in the middle and kind of tool things around, or let me swap a board on the ends, whatever it is, but let me swap and refund an entire board so that I don't just kind of sit there and have to right click. And man, if you're doing a minion build for Necromancer, you probably have almost the entire board of rare and magic nodes for the cultist. And let's say you want to swap off that minion build and go to maybe a bone spear build or a blood build. Well, you're going to have to do a lot of right clicking. I know at the end of the season, you can, or whatever that means, end of season, if they're talking about the end game of the season or whatnot, you can get the Scroll of Amnesia. The Scroll of Amnesia will completely reset all of your characters' Paragon and skill tree points. So that's nice in its own way, but maybe I don't want to swap off the entire thing. Maybe I just want to experiment with a different board in my build because I've already played a little bit with board and like, you know what? This isn't going to work for me. I want to swap into a different board. So I think that giving me the ability to just completely reset a board, even if it's just the same board and I'm playing on it, I can just press this button and I do something and I unequip the board and I can put the board back on. Just something that allows me to reset this board and play around with those points rather than manually right-clicking every single individual one. And not to mention, you have to unequip the glyph and then you have to right-click again to refund the cost of putting the points into this glyph. So just keep that in mind too, right? So there's just a lot of little nuance that I think this could help streamline swapping out different builds. Now I could have put this with the sigil portion, but I felt like it needed its own little discussion piece. The aspect inventory is tragically small. Like, yes, I know I can put them into my stash, but my stash is already limited to its 4 tabs. So now I only get 2 rows versus every other tab here, except for quests, and I don't really care about that, right? Gets that full 3 rows. So I say, just give me the extra row. I mean, you can make the argument plenty of times that we could have this be all the way down to the bottom of the screen and give me an extra row of inventory in and of itself, but I'm strictly talking about the aspect inventory needs to be increased since it's such a huge portion of the game. And maybe they're trying to say, hey, don't stockpile aspects, but really what that comes down to is telling me don't have aspects for experimenting with another build. And I mean, I've got a bunch of minion build aspects on here that are still on the items so that I can jump onto those minion builds to try it out, see what it's like. And since it's so expensive to rip off of ancestral aspects if I don't immediately need them, I just kind of keep them on the item. So even if you're telling me, hey, use your aspects, well, it's expensive to do it if I don't need it right away. So I'm going to actually just stockpile the item rather than the actual aspect itself until I do need it. So I think that increasing that inventory, allowing me to kind of superficially increase my stash, right? Because I'm putting less aspects into my stash, I think is a really big quality of life improvement, because then I can just have individual, I typically, my rule of thumb that I like to do, and it's not currently active because I've done a lot of breaking down recently, I try to keep general aspects, ones that apply to everyone, in my stash, and I try to keep ones that are exclusively for one character, the one character type, one class type on the character, right? Like there's a lot of Necromancer here on my guy because you guessed it, he's a Necromancer. So I try to kind of keep that. That's the best way I can kind of work around it. So it's like, oh, okay, the aspect inventory for necromancers, it's on my necromancer character. And these are all general aspects. Maybe you can use that for yourself. What the hell is this? Why is that? Why can I not just use that? That's got to be used for something in the future. It doesn't make sense why it's like that. But either way, I'm digressing. But I still think that increasing that aspect inventory would be a huge improvement. This is one, I think that all of us can really get behind, is the ability to lock items in your inventory. Right now I can press spacebar and I can mark them as junk. I don't know what this is on console, I'm sorry. But let's take a look at this item, for example. I love this ring. It's got crit strike, vuln damage, crit damage. I just am trying to roll it for overpower. So sometimes I'll pull it off and I'll go give it a shot at the Enchanter, try and give it some love. But it can be pretty easy for this thing to get lost in the tumult of just having a bunch of items in your inventory and not realizing where it is. So if I have the ability to permanently lock this thing, and that way I know I'll never accidentally salvage it, I know I'll never accidentally sell it, because it's not like it has a particularly unique name where I'm like, oh, the Aurora form, remember not to sell the Aurora form, whatever it is. So I think that giving us the ability to lock is far more important than marking things as junk, because I personally find that if I'm going to go through and press spacebar on all these things, what's the difference between me going through and just going up to the vendor and just pressing right click on all those things? It really doesn't save me any time to mark something as junk. Instead, it saves me more time to go, you know what, I want that, this, and that. And then I'm just going to go up and press the button and it sells the rest of them. Which brings me to my next point. This is going to apply to both the blacksmith and the vendor, but I need an ability to just simply sell all sacreds, or come over here and salvage all sacreds. Because again, like I've said many times in the video, once I've pushed into Torment, I'm not going to care what sacred items drop anymore. Maybe I'll care about them for a legendary, right? So that I can actually individually salvage those off. But the rare items, if they're ancestral, I'm going to look at them to see if I want to actually put an aspect into them to bring them into a legendary status to put them on my gear. So I think that having the ability to salvage and or sell all sacred items, just like we get with the occultists and sigils, that's our next topic, is going to be absolutely huge for me. And even more so too, like we're talking about all junk, which we talked about spacebar and stuff like that. The only time I use the all junk filter for the blacksmith is if I have multiple legendaries. Because if I want to break this legendary down, it tells me this, right? So if I've got like 4 legendaries in my inventory, I can just simply press left click then spacebar, left click then spacebar. It's the only time I'm going to use the junk filter is doing that. And then I can go boom, all junk. So this is a thing that I definitely think we need. It's just the ability to sell or salvage all sacred to get me out of town faster. I'm only here in the middle of a dungeon. I just want to salvage, sell, and get out of here because I can then take all my ancestrals and go put them in the stash real quick and salvage and look at them later. That way it doesn't slow me down in between every single town outing. Salvage and sell all my sacreds, stash my ancestrals, come back to them at the end of my romp, look at it all and go, okay, now I'm actually going to sell all of these things. I think that's going to go a long way to helping me out. Since we're on the topic of salvaging, and I are talking about sigils, this is kind of useless. Salvaging all sacred, all ancestral, and then all sigils. Well, again, when you're in Torment, you stop getting sacred sigils, right? Beyond a certain point, right? Once you crest into 21 tier plus nightmare dungeons, you're no longer getting your sacred ones. They don't drop anymore for you. You don't really care about them, so you're never going to need them. But you might get a tier 21, you might get a tier 71. That's not likely, right? You're going to get your tier or lower pretty much. But let's take a look at mine, what I've got right now. I've got a 27, a 28, a 39, a 50, and a 22, a 40, a 32. That's all over the range here. So if I simply press this button, I'm kind of screwed. If I press this button, I'm kind of screwed again because maybe I wanted to save some of those. So what I'm saying is get rid of this tab altogether. Take this icon and put it at the end of each one of these. So I can say, you know what? Let me just salvage all my 21 to 25 tier ancestral sigils because I just don't need them. Or this, or that, or this. And so every time I kind of pop into this screen, because I'm going to go push more of my 40 or 50 plus dungeons, I go click, 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 get rid of any of those that I might have had, get the sigil powder, and just go back to town on this. Otherwise, I got to go, okay, that's a 27, that's a 28, well, I don't need a 22, we can put the 22 over there. 50 is good, 39, 40, 32, let's put the 32 over there. Like, it causes me to have to do the micromanage of the inventory when I just want to get back into the Nightmare Dungeon. It's the same thing as salvaging and selling sacred items. They stop becoming useful at a very specific point in the game. Don't get me started on magic and base items. Why do they even drop in Torment? Because you're never going to use them. So it's just a little things like this that could just kind of remove a lot of the superfluous clicking and micromanaging of my inventory and sigils and all these little things that isn't part of the game to me. It's part of it's like a nuisance more than an actual okay, this is just how ARPGs are, blah, 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 blah. So I think that could go a huge way, again, to improving the experience of using sigils in Diablo IV. Now for enchanting. This is a pretty easy one, and it's one that we had in Diablo 3, and pretty much every other game that has some form of enchantment that allows you to replace affixes. Give me a list of the rollable affixes for this slot, so that if I can say, hey, you know what? And this is actually pretty good. Let's say I want to roll off damage to injured enemies. Well, let me get a list of the options that are going to go in place here. Because maybe I'm sitting here enchanting and rolling this and rolling this and rolling this and rolling this, and I'm looking and I don't know what I'm looking for. I personally do, because I'm going to go look at a website like d4builds.gg, go to the database, go to the affixes, and go to rings and see all of the list of things that I can get here. But maybe I'm a layman, or maybe I am just a casual player and don't understand that those things, those resources even exist. Why send me out of your game when it's already something that you've had in previous games that could just simply be pressed by, okay, I click this button, just like I click this, right? Like this, just a little expand button, and it shows me all of the available affixes that can go into here. And it shows me their range, just like, again, like we had in D3. I think that's a huge little quality of life bump that would help all the casual players become a little bit better at selecting the best gear or best affixes for their gear. Our last tip, and one that's really a little bit more nebulous, is about the world tier system. As it stands, you're going to level from level 1 to 50 in either world tier 1, which I recommend if it's your very first character, or world tier 2 if you're playing with some friends, you're leveling up an alt, whatever it is. And then you're going to crest into Nightmare, right? And Nightmare is there. It says recommended 50 to 70. Personal experience here, maybe it's anecdotal, but I have really found that my characters, I've jumped into Torment around level 60. In fact, I think you should really try to push yourself into Torment at level 60, because you then get access to Torment level Helltides, Torment level Legion events, and Torment level world bosses. So I think that Nightmare stands in this very weird place in the game right now. And I don't know the back end statistics. Maybe Blizzard could look at this and go, 85% of people are actually playing a Nightmare. I don't know. But I find that Nightmare is this really weird point in the game where you're really only there from level 50 to level 60. Sacred items become obsolete very fast, and there's really even more so awkwardly, there's a point where sacred items and base, like very low item level ancestral items will overlap. So there's a really funky thing here. So I don't actually have a good proposed fix for this. Maybe it's that Nightmare actually lasts to a true level 70. It actually has 10 more item power that all the items can truly be, and that then Ancestral can be 10 more item level upward, right? So rather than it being 705 or 725, I think is the max for Nightmare, whatever it is, it's now 715 or 735, whatever one was properly right. And the same thing then for Torment. For Torment, rather than it being Ancestral spawn at a max of 805, or for rare uniques it's like 825. Now it just goes to 815 and pushes that number up to 835, the other one. So I think that giving Nightmare a little bit more breathing room, or a little bit more breath, or maybe you drop the bottom level of this and it's actually accessible at level 40, whatever it is, I think that Nightmare just kind of feels like an awkward stage in the game where you're just there to get out of it as quick as you can to push into Torment. Now, the argument could be made here that Nightmare served a very similar purpose in something like Diablo II. You were in Nightmare only to just quickly edge your way into Hell, and then you suffered through the beginning portions of Act 1 in Hell to get the gear that you needed, because that gear rolled the best affixes. It's the same thing here in Torment. It rolls the best affixes, so you're better off getting into it as early as you can to get the best items so you're not constantly replacing them. I think that Nightmare could prove to be something that could exhaust players, where they spend a lot of time trying to gear out really nice sacred gear, jumping into Torment, struggling, and then quickly trying to think they've just got to quickly replace it with Ancestral gear, which is what you want. You want Ancestral gear because it's the best. So I think that Nightmare, in some way, shape, or form, needs to be tweaked just a little bit to feel more valuable, or feel like it's not just like okay, play this little bit until you can go to Torment, because then the rest of the game is there in Torment, right? You look at this, recommended 70 plus, 50 to 70, 1 to 50. So you spend 20 levels here of your 100 level journey, more or less, right? So I wish I had a good solution here, and if you do, by all means, go ahead and let me know in the comment section below. Like, hey, you know what, actually I kind of think Nightmare plays very well as it is, and I don't think it needs to be touched. Or you say, yeah, I agree, Nightmare felt very awkward to me, and I felt like I was just kind of pushing through it quicker. Maybe again, that answer is that you get access to Nightmare at level 40, so you're spending more time with your sacreds, so you feel a little bit more powerful coming into Torment, you know a little bit more, whatever it is. I still think it needs some little bit of tweaking. And with that here, it brings our list to a close. So let me know in the comment section below. Do you agree with all these quality of life changes? Are some of them just like, yeah, you know, I guess I think I need a Sigil Currency Tab, but I'm fine with the way sigils are in the consumables. Or maybe you think, yeah, we definitely need the ability to lock items in the inventory. Whatever it is, let it be known in the comment section below. I feel like getting as much of a dialogue around these quality of life changes that we want, and getting an actual true barometer of the ones we truly need and want versus the ones that, like, yeah, I guess it's kind of a nice to have, but it doesn't affect my gameplay, is important, right? To get that conversation out in the wild so Blizzard can see it, Blizzard can respond to it. They've already said they've seen a lot of our comments about resetting with every season. Diablo 2 just did their next season, and they're allowing you to bring your existing characters into it. You reset everything and you're good to go. Diablo 3 had your rebirth system. So it stands to reason that we'll probably get that added in for Diablo 4. Another example here too would be us talking about stash tabs and how they said, okay, we'll expand the stash tabs. We'll figure out how to do it. That's coming in probably season 2, I think they said. But the gem currency thing is coming in hopeful season 1. So they are responding to these requests for things to be changed around. And I know probably the biggest quality of life thing we could probably request is like balance changes to builds, so they feel more diverse and more punchy in the top levels of the game. But that's a video for another time. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. If you have any questions, concern, everything like that, go ahead and let me know in the comment section below. But as always, have a good one and take care.